This is a demo of disaster recovery in IBM PureApplication System. Disaster recovery provides the capability to fail over from one rack to another with near zero data loss. There is some setup work that is necessary before creating the disaster recovery relationship between a primary rack and a backup rack, including creating fiber channel connectivity to provide communication between the storage controllers. For this demo, the initial setup work has already been completed. You will see how to set up disaster recovery profiles, validate them, and enable them. Then you will see how to use the disaster recovery monitoring feature, and finally you see a failover from the primary rack to the backup rack. So let's get started. First, you define a disaster recovery profile on both the primary rack and the backup rack. Here we're on the primary rack. We'll go to the System Console, System Menu, Disaster Recovery. Click the plus to create a profile. Read the disaster recovery agreement. We need a name for the profile. We'll call it primary since we're on the primary rack. Enter a description. The Pure management location is the IP address of the backup rack. You need a trust user ID, so that should have security privileges. And here you see a message that says the profile has been successfully created. And on the disaster recovery list you see a primary profile here, which I'll click on, and then you can see the details for that profile. Now we need to create a profile on the backup rack, so I'll click on the backup rack, System Menu, Disaster Recovery, and create a profile here. This one I'll call backup. The Pure management location in this case is the IP address of the primary rack. This profile was also successfully created. And here you see it in the list. After creating the profile, you validate that the rack is ready to participate in the disaster recovery relationship. Validation checks that the prerequisites are met and that the communication is set up properly between the racks. So we're on the backup rack, and we'll click the validate button, and a message says that the profile is being validated. After a couple of minutes, you see a message that says that the disaster recovery validation succeeded. So now it's time to go validate on the primary rack. So we switch to the primary rack and click validate. After a couple of minutes, a message shows that the disaster recovery profile validation has succeeded. The next step after creating and validating the profile is enablement. You need to enable both the backup profile and the primary profile, but note that you must enable the backup profile first. So let's go to the backup system and click on enable. You select the role, in this case it's the backup system, and you see a message saying the profile is being enabled. Then a message shows that says disaster recovery enablement is in progress, but it's waiting for the primary system to be enabled. So let's switch to the primary system and we'll enable this profile. You have to choose the role. This is the primary system, and you see a message saying the profile is being enabled. Then a message shows that disaster recovery enablement is in progress and is validating the disk replication configuration. After enabling both profiles, replication of the data begins, which can take several hours to complete. The monitoring function allows you to check the replication status at any time. The function is provided on both the primary and backup racks, but the information displayed is similar. Here on the profile page you see a summary of the monitor. It shows that the management data has been replicated, and it shows that the storage data is still replicating. Click on View Details for more information. Here you see the management data section and also the workload data section. And workload data can be viewed either as cloud groups or as images. For cloud groups, you can drill down into the virtual machines within a cloud group and also to virtual disks within a machine, and then you can see the replication status for each. On the Images tab you can see a list of the images, and then for each image you can see the replication status. After several hours the replication is complete, and you can see that here on the monitor summary. You see that the management data is available and the storage is available. So now that the initial copies are complete, you're ready to do a planned or unplanned failover. A planned failover is an ongoing scheduled event that's useful to prove that the disaster recovery environment works. But the rest of this demo shows the procedure for an unplanned failover. In an unplanned failover, the primary rack is no longer functioning, so you initiate the failover on the backup rack. So here we're on the backup rack looking at the backup profile, and for failover you see it's a two-step process. The first step to prepare the system for failover, and the second step to actually perform the failover. So we'll click View Details for step 1. First you select the type of failover, which in this case is unplanned, and then there's a reminder that you need to assign at least one compute node per cloud group and also update your top of rack switches to make your VLANs available. So click OK. After a short delay of just a minute or so, the first step is complete, and now you see there's a button available on step 2 to take control from the primary rack. So we'll click that, and then it reminds you that there will be a little delay of an hour or so while the failover is taking place, and you might want to go out and reroute the IP subnets to the backup system while the failover is happening. And also after failover is complete, it reminds you that you need to start your shared services and start any selected workloads on the backup system. So are you ready to failover the system? And we'll click OK. When failover is finished, you'll get a message that tells you that failover has completed, but also that disaster recovery is disabled, and that's because you no longer have a disaster recovery relationship between the primary and backup racks. So now you're ready to start selected workloads on the backup rack. Thank you for watching this demonstration of disaster recovery for IBM PureApplication System.